Welcome to the 2 Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%, in which we take a giant book, break it down bit by bit, section by section, talk about it, talk about other stuff, laugh about stuff, have a good time, make some 2-bit analyses, so on and so forth. We are in season 19, which is dedicated to The Remembered Part by Rodrigo Frazan, the third book of his Part trilogy. And today we're going to be talking up to page 281. Which is it's like just over a third of the book. Just to make this clear to everyone. I'm Chad Post from Open Letter Books, joined as always by Brian Wood of Joytime Killbox, author of Joytime Killbox.
Good morning, good evening. We're all over the place today. I'm out on the West Coast. Where are you?
I'm in Latvia in a motorcycle hotel, a hotel for motorcyclists.
What's a motorcycle hotel?
It's like it's primarily set up for people who are like motorcycling across the country. This is like one of the places that can stop and stay, like a relatively. It's like an inn. It has a bar, restaurant, little rooms like the one I'm in, a really nice rooftop. Pretty. It's kind of cool. It's got like random motorcycle shit all over. But it's for like people going across the country. I think it wasn't last year. It was only open every so often, but this summer it's open so far. So we are 10 hours apart.
Yeah, I'm in wine country, and I'm learning that red wine's probably the worst hangover you can have.
I will, for anyone watching, this is a non-alcoholic beer that I have here because I am like I'm abstaining for the time being. But nevertheless, I need to buy something here, and like I can just use your Wi-Fi and your space for free.
I am not abstaining. I'll tell you that. sorry if the voice is deeper than normal.
You sound very friendly. You can red wine.
I've got like vineyards outside the window that's reminding me of all the mistakes I made. So,
red wine plus beer plus whiskey. Now that's a hangover.
Yeah, no good. One thing that I liked in this section of the book is the writers. I started to jump in, but I was just thinking about this, about mistakes or things that we shouldn't do that we go back to. The obsession with Nabokov's book that he can't read.
Yeah, ARDOR.
Yeah. Do you have a book like that you like want to read, or that you should read, and you want to? It's like a white whale. Not like it's a white whale, but it's like something that you can't take down for some reason.
I'm sure there's a better answer to this, but the one that I always want to read and I every year intend to and never have started is the Proust in Search of Lost Time. I've read the first volume, but then I was like, oh yeah, I can just jump in with volume 2. And I was like, no, it's been too long. And I feel like if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it like kind of all the way through. And every year I think or every month I'm like, I could start, this could be the time. And then I look at like what I need to do for work or whatever. I'm like, oh no, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
These will not sustain me saying like, guess what? In a year, I'll get you your book because I really I'll let your book in a year because I'm really interested in reading about time right now in the lost bit. How about you? Do you have a book like that?
I've got tons of them, but the one that really I'm embarrassed that I've never read it. Obviously, I've read parts of it. I keep starting it. Is Ulysses.
Oh,
I've never read all of Ulysses, and I don't know. Yeah, it's one of those. That's one of those books. The other one too is Gravity's Rainbow.
Oh, yeah. Both of
so
those.
two books I know you like a lot that I've never read. It's so embarrassing, but whatever.
Notes on there, or whatever they're called now, Spark Notes. I don't know. Yeah.
Clearly, I don't have a problem reading a big, difficult book. Those are just, big, difficult books I haven't read. I guess I don't know.
I have, yeah.
The thing with the Ulysses, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of like wrestling with a giant. Those kind of books, and I got that feeling with Out of ARDOR as well when we read it.
That was the book that I started that like 4 times and never read it before we read it here.
Okay. But so there's that idea of like wrestling with a giant, and you know that it's going to be like you're in for something. It's going to be good,
Yeah.
and it's going to be difficult, but I don't know, maybe it's like running a marathon where this is fun, and then you're like, boy, I really hope I finish.
That's what she said.
Yeah, yeah. I'll get an aluminum blanket at the end of this all. This will be great.
I, I'm gonna get a free Yeti if I complete this. The thing with like those books too, and I mean not so much with, I don't think Frazan's book fits this, although I bet it does for certain people. But in my mind, and this is the case with Finnegan's Wake, which I read like 2/3 of, which is basically like a mulligan at that point, right? Like you're a chip in or whatever I'd call it. Like that's close enough. The is that with those books, like you're gonna be confused. There's gonna be a time, like it's not that they're difficult in and of themselves, but the fact that you're gonna, or that they're gonna be, I think the part of the challenge or the reason that it's challenging or difficult is that you will be confused for a period of time. And I don't think
Yeah.
people like being confused.
Yeah, like I usually don't like it at all. But which was really weird because when we did the season when we read JR, I didn't mind being
Yeah.
confused with that one. And like sometimes, and with Rodrigo's work, I'm confused all the time reading it.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, and I don't mind it.
Interesting. What about it? What is the confusion part?
I still don't fully know the typewriter versus the regular part and why why we're going back and forth on it, but I don't care. Like I just I just like
I
I
have a
just like
theory
reading
about
it.
I have a
Sure.
theory about that. If there's Okay, I'm gonna apologize if someone is listening to this or hears this podcast at one point in time. I will reply to your email, but we did get an email from someone who's having trouble reading the book, like physically reading the book, because the typewriter sections are too light. They're like, can you print it
Okay.
with like heavier font? Because it is. And I was like, what? And then I started looking, I was like, yeah, I gotcha. Like
Especially
I'm in
I
that.
was reading it in low light this morning. It's really hard to read in low light, but
Dude,
yeah.
the older you get, the more you realize there's not enough light in the world. There just is not enough, period, full stop. But that's interesting. So I have a theory about the American typewriter versus the other one, that relates to this section where he is on the plane. I mean, we'll recap in a little bit. It doesn't really matter. But there's a bit when he's on the plane and he's thinking about Penelope. And Penelope speaks in the American typewriter voice as like a monologue, like straight through. And even's like the ex writer thinks to himself like, "Oh, this is like one of my characters. She always speaks like she's like practiced these monologues and blah blah, and they come complete like this." And my thought was that these two are like the bicameral mind. That the way that like the consciousness of the creator is created is by having these two opposing things, these two different viewpoints against one another, and that even though they're kind of the same, it's like the reflective part. So like you are not just one voice, you're the voice and then the response to that voice. And that the American typewriter is sort of a response, and then he responds to that, and that responds to him. And that's how you create consciousness, is through the bicameral mind concept. And that's how I've been reading it, as like a kind of back and forth of the his consciousness between statements and then reactions to those statements in that way.
Yeah, I wonder too with the choice of the typeface if you have the writer and the writing eh, in some ways too.
Yeah, I mean it's nice. It's a pretty font.
Yeah, no, because like when you think of like typewriter font, you think of letters, you think of um, right, like the movie, like in the movie, and they type in the this is the intrusion of the story to let you know where we're at, CIA
It's like
headquarters.
it's like watching Riverdale when there's one whole
Yeah.
season in which Jughead has to type away, or else all of Riverdale will like implode in some sort of ghastly. I don't even remember what anymore, but the world will fall apart. So he has to tick tock type all the time. But yeah, that's true. That makes sense too, and like that, it is literary in that regard,
Mhm.
or
But
literary
again, I don't.
reference.
It doesn't matter. I don't really care because I still just enjoy it on the line level. I don't have to. I
Yeah.
don't have to get it. I mean, it's the same thing with like this obsession that the writer has with Nabokov. Like, you don't have to get it. Like, you don't have to know all the intricacies of the form of pale fire to, like, it would be helpful if you understood that. But if you don't, you could still just, hey, it's a poem. It works as a poem. It's actually a pretty good poem. Oh, these little notes about the poem. This is pretty cool. Like, oh, the whole story's in the notes. Neat. Okay. You know, like, you still enjoy that without, breaking down.
That bit was great about Pale Fire and about the writer sitting next to someone who's like basically ex-CIA, or what do they call it, the company or the whatever, and starts talking about like the outfit on Nabokov and like how they thought he could be an agent and all of that stuff. That's a fun part of this. This section was great. I thought it was a random, like this is not intentional, but I love that this section begins with him, the writer, saying, so now even further from all of that, enough plotting out the same thing over and over, plotting out his resentment of others and his disgust with almost everything that had to do with his occupation, and goodbye to the anguished diatribe of thunder and lightning. Like, it's great that he's sort of like, okay, we've been doing this like same bit for 204 pages now. Like, let's move on into another sort of like, let's go forward now. You've had enough.
And then it recaps the toy that goes backwards, which we've already done before.
Oh yeah. I mean, it doesn't not keep going on and on, but it has a little bit of movement, I believe. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, the whole thing, this whole bit, like up until like next week, we will end this section or this part one. And I think I think it changes after part one a bit, but like all of the parts are going to be, I mean, this is a bit of reiterating, even to that one where he's talking to the CIA, like, God, it's the worst when these people start sounding like me and my characters. You know what they're going to say next. And like the whole CIA, like, we used to spy on people, but now we don't have to spy on anyone because they're all taking pictures of themselves and putting it on Instagram and, telling us about food they ate and where they are and who they're with. Like, yeah, right back into the anti-cell phone rant and right back into the same sort of diatribe, but from a new angle. A fun angle. I mean, that's always been, I've thought of that before. Like, you really, like, you don't have to spy on anyone anymore. Like,
no.
Of that. Sure.
I just love, like, everybody's convinced at this point that if you talk around your phone, they're going to push the ads on you, because I had mentioned bicycle and now I'm getting all these bicycle ads on my, it's like, man, I wish I was that important.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that it has less to do with like what you say and more of like who you're around. But like, I know that if you write things in Gmail, those words are used for ad stuff. So that's not shocked. And I've gotten some wacky shit before. Like I've said some weird things and gotten weird ads as a response to those things. But yeah. I mean, it's not like, I don't think anyone's spying on you. I think it's much more of like, it's much more crass than that.
No, I know. I just don't understand how I get the same picture for the hot single that wants to meet me. And
I know.
It changes when I change cities and I get onto the Wi-Fi, they're in that same city and it's the same picture. It's crazy. This lady's following me around and she really wants to meet up, apparently.
Bro, I get so many catfish requests. Like in Northern, I believe it's too many. I believe it's more than the norm. Like, it's bad. Like, I can go in my Instagram right now and there's probably like 9 of them that are like, hey, want to meet you. And there's like one picture of that I took of myself with someone else's dog. Cause I hate dogs and I don't like dogs and I don't want a dog and I'm good with no dogs in the world. And I took a picture of the dog as a joke, and underneath that, endlessly, I get messages from fake bots that will comment on that and then start texting me or DMing me. It's really insane, but yeah, I could go through all of, like, they're weird. They've got this weird one the other week or like last week in which the woman was like, I'm sorry, I hope this isn't invasive. I just want to meet you. I just want to talk to you. You're so cute, blah, blah. And I look at their profile, and like the first half of it is like a totally normal person, right? Like there's like 20 pictures. First 10, totally normal human being, probably legitimately this human being. The next 10 pictures like not the same woman and totally like tramped out, like in every way that you can imagine. It's basically like softcore porn, but it goes from like normal to like the exact opposite in like 1 second. As they're saying this all aloud, my phone's right here. I can guarantee there's going to be a new one in like a little bit because they're hearing us.
Yeah, I did like the part, like imagine the JFK assassination and with today's technology, like all of the phones, all of the just people with their dog stumbles along the skull because they forgot to pick it up, or
it's so funny.
The way the world's different now.
It really is. I mean, that is one of the more interesting, like it's one of those things that like I think we've talked about this on here, but one of the things that's really interesting to me about like books and movies that work really well are set in between 2001 and 2006 is like the best time to set a book or a movie, because you have 9/11, so you have like the anxiety, the generalized anxiety of the 21st century, but then you do not have cell phones. So people can't always be on their cell phones or communicating that way. They have to have a different thing. There's no iPhones. There are cell phones, but no iPhones until 2007 or 2008. And so there's that little gap of like anxiety, but not instant communication, not Instagram, not Twitter, not any of that stuff, like that in between days. And it's kind of that's sort of the sweet spot for like investigating the modern consciousness.
Yeah, I've noticed with student work, they need to figure out a way to have texts in their stories.
God, I know.
And so trying to figure out how to format it or to make it look right, or how to, but yeah, there has to be text. They have a hard time telling stories without incorporating text messages.
And so, they can't tell
the cell phone. Yeah, because that's the way you're going to communicate with somebody. Obviously, you're not going to call them on the phone, or actually, you're not going to have dialogue in that way. So yeah, I find it interesting that it changes the way books are.
Yeah.
Seeping into everything.
I mean, it's so funny. Yeah. I'm trying to think.
Speaking of books, what are the good? You had said there was I wasn't able to look at it, but you sent me a link to a New York Times article about.
So yeah.
Because in this section, I was also enamored because this section, I got a kick out of the best under 39 list, or like what about the writers that are over 40, right?
Yeah, there was a guy I met once who was pitching PW to do I think they did do it, in fact, like best debut novelist over 40 or best debut novelist over 50, rather than like the best debuts by someone under 30 or whatever. It was like the opposite of, and that's super cool. Yeah, I love that bit. And like you had mentioned the idea of like the kind of personalized canon versus the canon. And like the authors that
too.
For the writer are like the ones that he always goes back to, the Nabokovs, the Gaddis. We keep referencing William H. Gass, which is interesting, and David Foster Wallace, and does point out that they're all dudes, and that Penelope has the advantage. Dedek's sister, who was super successful, had the advantage of being female and writing, fantasy and whatnot, and everyone loves her books for all these various reasons. But it is interesting that he has those as his canon people. But what I found was, because of Cormac McCarthy's passing, there was someone had posted like this list that came out in 2006. So this is tricky to even conceive of, but it's a list that came out in the New York Times in 2006 that was, what is the best work of American fiction of the last 25 years? So it's 1981 through 2006 books that came out during that period alone, right? And then it looks like there were judges and they had votes, but they have whatever runners up. And I saw the list, and the person had been like, "Oh, look at, Blood Meridian was almost the winner of the best list. Cormac McCarthy stays strong, so on and so forth." And I thought, I wonder what this list is and how much of this list is terrible. So I'm just gonna. I don't want to. I don't. And then like, well, 25 years from now would be 1998 through 2023. Like almost all of the books on here would be cut out, would not qualify, which I think is. I'll see if there are that any qualify. But here's what they are. So, Beloved by Toni Morrison, fine. Underworld by Don DeLillo, Blood Meridian, Cormac McCarthy. Then I don't know why it has it as one, but it has the Rabbit novels by John Updike, which big fuck no. Just a big, huge fuck no to all of that. Sorry. I think those books suck. I think those books are representative of like a really shitty part of like male crap culture. Like fuck those books and fuck John Updike. And no, just a big no. American Pastoral by Philip Roth. Then it has like other books received votes, which seems to be like they were kind of around, like a real long list, like Confederacy of Dunces, Housekeeping by Marilyn Robinson, Winter's Tale by Mark Halperin, which if it's anything like the movie, like I know that book exists and people love it, but that movie is like wildly garbage. And if the book is anything like that, I can't believe in this either. Don DeLillo's White Noise, The Counterlife by Philip Roth, Libra by Don DeLillo, Where I'm Calling From by Raymond Carver, Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, which is the first book on this list that has come out within the past 25 years from today. Mating by Norman Rush, which every millennial right now just like that's listening to this just like lost their minds because that's all they read. That one also would be eligible. Jesus the Son from Dennis Johnson, also eligible. Operation Shylock, eligible. Independence Day by Richard Ford, no. God, no. Nothing Richard Ford writes is worth reading. Period. Like fuck Richard Ford too. I've had bad dealings with him, met him, and know about some like Me Too stuff from him. Hey, fuck him.
Well, that's his short story. I'd put in his short story Rock Springs, and you can rest of it, but
no, nothing.
You hate the person, but you can't hate the writing on that one.
I hate the writing too. More Cormac McCarthy, the Border Trilogy, more Philip Roth, The Human Stain, The Known World by Edward P. Jones, and then The Plot Against America by Philip Roth. Like Philip Roth is like 90% of this list of best books of the last 25 years are just like everything Philip Roth did. Plus I had some Don DeLillo, throw in some Cormac McCarthy, and Beloved. That sounds good. There's like Beloved and Housekeeping are the only books by women on this list.
When were women allowed to start writing books in America? Is that happening around 2000? Whoa.
Oh my! I don't know. I can't do this.
I'm curious who the judges were for that, but yeah.
Well, I can tell you because there is that is listed. Hold on. The judges are here as we load. Good, make it. Oh no, there's a lot of them. Kurt Anderson, Roger Angel, Madison Smart Bell, Amy Bender, Harold Bloom, Sven Burkett, Susan Choi, Dave Eggers, Lucy Ellman, Carlos Fuentes, A.M. Holmes, John Irving. This is, I mean, the list, like, if you can see, the list goes on, and on.
Yeah.
But like, nevertheless, what a bad outcome. Like lots of smart people put into a room with a really shitty output. Kind of goes against the whole, like you get out what you put in sort of vibe. Instead you put in good people and end up with garbage. But there's no way I could do this, but like, I wonder what you'd say for the top 25 or top books of the past 25, top American books of the past 25 years now.
Yeah, that would be tough.
I can't, I mean, it's hard to think of like what came out from 98 onwards, but I don't know, it'd be interesting. But which other sections of this, what other bits of this section did you particularly gravitate towards?
I don't know. I'm just a total dork, but I like the stuff where the writer goes into the little breakdowns of what makes, why the movie was made a certain way in certain parts, or why, or how a book was written. Those are my favorite parts.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that in this section. So
There is. I really like the so I mean the one advancement aside from like talking to the one guy for a while and then the Penelope bit is that it again reiterates that he's going to Mexico to look for Penelope's son, who
Mm-hmm.
cannot be named, who has this wonderful he has a notebook of his of Penelope's son, and the notebook's name is or has a title called Master Advice of a Man Who Sleeps on the Floor, which is a wonderful title. Like that's a
Loved
really
it.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Like I sort of said that Rodrigo wasted that in this book. Like that would be a great book. Like someone should write that. Some phrase on fanfic. just advice for master advice of a man who sleeps on the floor. I liked a lot of the like.
I was gonna say that sounds like a really bad way of giving a compliment. You know, you've got a lot of really great ideas that you're wasting on this shitty book you're writing here. Have you thought of maybe putting those in a good book?
You got a great book. Put a shitty title in the great book. Like, you don't need to. You can save that. Save that for later, yo. The person I really liked on this that I gravitated towards were all the various names of like the bits that he has about writing in terms of like advice and just general bits. I'll have one in a second. The one that stands out the most is all literary fiction answered all literary fiction answered to two basic motives. It could be synthesized in two movements: the family and the journey. And then he references and then in a novel by Richard Powers that he says there are only two possible stories: the two most ancient and elemental, the only two you would ever read, the one where the future came to beat the past to a pulp, or the one where the past leapt on the future to strangle it. Which I like those kind of things. And then the other one that like that I really like.
I've heard that in a slightly different way, where like the two stories are: a stranger comes to town, or you leave town, right?
So we have a book coming out, Sarah Mesa's new book, Una More, and we were working on the jacket copy for that for like a day earlier this week. But I mean, it wrote and rewrote the jacket copy, and that was the beginning thing. Was like initially it was like the character arrives in a small town or leaves the big city. Like it's kind of like a weird. It's both of those simultaneously, like leaves the one to arrive in the other, but arrives in the like. If we ended up framing it as arriving in the small town, her blah 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 was kind of the bit, but like it reminded me of that exact thing. The story's either you leave, so a stranger leaves or a stranger arrives, which is great, and it's all about love and death. That's all everything's about, love and death.
Yeah, so like you encounter a stranger or you are the stranger, right?
Yeah. The other one I love that reminds me of my Icelandic obsession of sagas is where he talks about more in a moment. It was clear that more in a moment, which he thought would function as the most perfect epitaphs on that final page that was one's headstone. I was like, yeah, that's like my out of the saga bit. Like out of the saga or more in a moment. Those are good epitaphs for headstones. I think about my headstone way a lot. Like I'm gonna pre-order one. I'm sure. I just get to settle on which one of these dumb phrases I think is the best.
I told you I was sick.
It's just a big middle finger. That's what my urn should be, just a big middle finger out of the saga, like wrapped around. That would be wonderful. Those are the ones that stood out to me. It's like I also love dig at like the culture and the sort of like economics of writing. Which this book has and I think that this will tie into the Dracula stuff that will like come. But there's like a real subtext of the economics of writing. I mean, like at times it's just text, like that Penelope is super wealthy, and because of her wealth and because of her success with her like quasi Harry Potter thing, he's allowed to exist. She like essentially bequeaths him a life because otherwise he would have been, struggling with his own books. But then there's like this subtext of it where it's like a little bit more subtle, at least like on 245, where he says like, we're starting out, there are no literary festivals, no trophies, no translations. And then in parentheses, translations for which foreign publishers applied for subsidies that would never be awarded to him to write the very book that they now wanted to have translated. Like there's that little and like there's an earlier one was when they're traveling or when he's going to the different conferences and events and festivals that the writers don't get paid, but the organizers get funded. And this was like an old Dubrovka complaint too of that they expect you to do everything for free, but they're all like, paid for it. And that's the subtext of like the rapacious way that like the marketplace can suck out both creativity and money and property out of like the literary and artistic fields is interesting. And I think that's going to come more. I think that will come. I mean, maybe not. I think we'll be able to connect it to the Dracula stuff, though.
And then the last piece with this one, and again, I think it's another one of my blind spots is I don't think I've read Transparent Things.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, and it's really important to this section. And I kept trying to think, is this one of those ones I tried to read and didn't read? What's the Nabokov book where he's the main character is a teacher and he's like at the wrong lecture?
No, that's Penelope.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, because was that referenced here? We talked about snoring on the train, and they're the same people that shit with the door open. Like this is the same type of person. I feel like that was in the beginning of that. I was trying to remember. Okay, got it.
He is on the train at the beginning of that. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what's in Penelope, but that's the Penelope one. Transparent Things is the one that opens and ends with like sort of a disembodied ghost narrator, and it's like normal in between there, but like it has this kind of creeping sense of like of spiritual, non-corporeal narration. It's really interesting. It's It's very short. Like I want to say it's like 100 pages maximum. It's like a thin one. The other one is like Look at the Harlequins, which Rodrigo turned me on to, which I'd always heard like nobody liked. And he's like, no, it's amazing because it's like a parody. It's like Nabokov parodying himself. And it really is, where it's like the characters like VB is the writer. And like there's lots of like, because people assume that Nabokov had all these affairs. So this writer has all these wives and all these like things, but it's like the opposite of him in a lot of ways. And yet at the same time, it's like Nabokov doing Nabokov, like he's doing his own bits and like kind of making them funny in that way. Kind of the way that like we talked about this in the last year's 2666 season, but that last book of his, Woes of the True Policeman, supposedly can be read as the parody of all Bolaño stuff. The Bolaño is like kind of joking about what it takes to be a Bolaño book. I think that's fun. In a way, like that vibe is sort of throughout here too. Like I feel like in some ways Rodrigo is always packing full of what Rodrigo's books are, to the point where it's almost like the narrator or writer is like kind of parodying what Rodrigo is. It's both amazing and earnest and like aesthetically brilliant, and also like kind of a joke. Like when he references and describes himself as like it's like one of your terms, a maximalist and even retro avant-garde writer who is increasingly difficult to read for newcomers or for those who at this point would never come.
Oh, so good.
It's really.
Did you have anything? I've got to get off here in a second. Do you have anything that was your favorite from this section?
The one. Well, there's two. I have two last questions, or one statement, one question. So the one question, it's on 276. There's this bit, and I guess I don't know the history of this, or I guess maybe I have it coded wrong in my mind, but where it references Henry James. It says Henry James late in his life, long after supposedly regurgitating that line always attributed to him, the one that goes, "Tell a dream, lose a reader," but that neither he nor anybody else seemed able to locate anywhere in his work. And wouldn't it be great if that line were a collective dream, something dreamed by all his readers but lost? I always thought that was a John Gardner quote.
Maybe, because I know Gardner's whole thing was the fictional dream.
Right. I thought
but
one of the.
But then he had like the advice of like, you can't. Don't give us reality. Don't give us a dream. But yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I thought it was like along these lines, but I didn't realize that was a Henry James thing too. If it was or isn't, who knows? But on that
I don't
same page, I
know.
really
So
like the bit that says
it's Sinbad in that genie movie from the early '90s. Yeah.
the what's that called? The Mandela effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true. The line that I really like too, that's like, I don't know if this is my line of the week, but is the other thing, like when he has his Bijou notebook and has all those little idea bits, like what I refer to as like the tickler file of like jokes or bits or like ideas that I've like I used to keep on my phone before I became a shitty writer and a shitty at everything. But the one that I really like here is a measuring device that calculates the royalties paid to the author of a book, not on the basis of the number of copies sold, but on the book's positive impact on the psyches and lives of readers. Like that's like ties. I mean, that's directly ties into like my never ending like attempt to understand value outside of sales. You convince people that there's a way of having value outside of sales, even if it's non-quantifiable, but trying to figure out how to quantify a non-quantifiable thing without using sales or revenue. It's like Moneyball.
Yeah, I remember I had one of my professors. He wrote a book that was, I don't know, for just being kind, wasn't the best. It was really pretentious and full of itself, and it was historical fiction. It was really boring, and didn't sell well. But it was, major publisher, had pretty good everything. So he was kind of disappointed. Like this was my great debut, and boy, I just gave this pretentious, steaming pile of shit as a book. And then many years later, someone was able to get a hold of him by email and had mentioned that their dad had died, and his book was on the bedside table. And so when they were cleaning out the house, he got the book and read it and stuff, and just wanted to thank him that like I got to kind of connect with him one last time by reading the same book that he's reading. And so thank you for this book. Thank you for writing it. Like, and he was like, wow, okay, that makes it all worthwhile, I guess. Like that's the value, right? That's what a book can do. That's no, it's not the 84 cents for or whatever your royalty is. With that, I don't know what the advance was. I don't think he any sales of that book, but
yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, that sort of response goes a long way. Like,
yeah,
sales are always going to be disappointing, I think. Like unless you're like a mega bestseller or even just a bestseller, probably okay. But like generally speaking, like you're always going to be disappointed. Like, it's never going to be as high as you want it to be as the publisher or the author or anything. Like you always want more. But like those moments are like well worth it. There was something as you were saying, you reminded me of, oh man. So I've been reading, I'm not going to say too much about this, but I've been reading submissions for an award that are contemporary books from like the past year. And dude, a lot of garbage gets published. Like everything is funny to read these books and like be reading. I mean, they're from big houses, small houses, a lot of big houses though. And be reading them and be like, this is trash. And then read part of the remembered part. And it's basically making fun of exactly what's trashy and not interesting about this like churn it out quasi autofiction that's just like overrun our contemporary literary sphere. And it's fucking terrible. Like, then that's where I forgot that's what sparked me to send you that thing, is that if you did look at the past 25 years, like if there's anything in the past years, like there's so much bad. There's so many bad books. And then I look these up and they all get these reviews, and the reviews are like, I don't know what they're talking about. There's like one or two that were honest, or like, this is the most disappointing book I've read all year, or like so one person was like, I saw a good review of this, but clearly nobody read past the second page, because after that, this book is a mess. And that's how I feel about a lot of contemporary stuff right now. Like I'm getting a little bitter again of like, yeah, this is what he's complaining about. Why aren't people ambitious? Why aren't people doing interesting things? Why are people all writing this kind of like trite? There's one book I don't mind throwing this one under the bus, but there's one book about a person going to work for the third largest internet company to help figure out what makes people happy. And I was like, it's supposed to be a satire. It's supposed to be funny, blah, blah. It was so straight, so flat, and so awful to read. Like I kept being like, there has to be a joke. This has to be like somehow like this has to be funny. And I'd read the reviews and they're like, oh, well, the second half picks up. I was like, this book is fucking 400 pages. I'm not waiting for the second half to pick up of like the most like straightforward, like, and then I went to work and then I got this seat and then I got a coffee and then we had this meeting and like, what are you doing? What are we promoting here? That's my scorching take on the literary scene of 2023. Brought to you by.
Well, I think it's probably the publisher's fault. If publishers would stop publishing books with this big I in it, maybe people would stop writing books that have a big I in it. I don't know.
I heard a
blame it all on Cat Person. Okay, there.
Yeah, Cat Person. Cat Person is really what's being referenced in here, right? He's making fun of like the big advance, the story that like takes off, and there's a big advance, and the book never really lives up to that hype. That's 1,000% Cat Person. But there's a I don't know what it actually is. It's the Spain's public radio. They had an interview that included a conversation with someone from the Cervantes Institute who said that the tough thing for getting Spanish literature out in the world in translation is that there's not enough commercial success. Too many of the books are being translated by small presses, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know what? You ingrateful little bastard. Like, you really just managed to like make me want to fucking blow down all of the Spanish books we're doing because you don't even appreciate the fact that we're one of the people doing more of them than anyone. You're like, oh God, we really need Random House or else, but fuck Random House. Fuck off. Okay, I'm done. I'm not going to go on my tear about how pissy I am about book publishing at the moment, but it's not. I'm not in a good place.
All right. Well, here's my favorite. One of my favorite lines from this section. This is the part where the writer's complaining about young writers and complaining about how because his email is so easy, first name, last name at whatever.com.
Yep.
So inundated with emails, and of course he answers all of them. But here it is when they're having them have their manuscripts sent in, page 243. But a while back, he discovered a far better and more efficient approach. He told them that what they'd written was a true masterpiece, that it was so good and so transcendent that he'd had to stop reading it because he was afraid it would give him writer's block.
I couldn't stop laughing at that section.
That section was great. I was like, oh man, I had to rethink. Was I one of the young writers that did all this stuff? Well, only half of this stuff, I guess. I guess I'm maybe not that bad.
There's a problem where the U of R's email got all hacked because of a phishing thing that somebody clicked on, and I think maybe more than one, in fact, but it like led to like chaos, and everyone has to like VPN in now, and it's like all just a mess. And that only gave me further fuel to my like, don't answer your email, buyer. Like, just don't look, don't answer, don't open. You're good.
Yeah.
You'll never bring down the system. You'll always be in the good graces of the email gods if you just never open any of them. Yeah, I don't have a favorite line other than the ones I've read because I thought here it is. This is my line of the week. The ambition of the work didn't seem to matter at all. What really mattered completely was the lust of the life. Where he's complaining about people that don't care about their actual books, but about being able to like say they're a writer on Instagram. I remember, I don't know if it's still a hashtag, but I remember the hashtag for a while of hashtag *MWriting. It drove me insane. Where it's just like, come on, write the book. Okay, so next week we go up to the end of part 1, which I think is page 354, something like that. Maybe we'll get off the airplane sometime, maybe not. But until then, you can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, watch us on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, subscribe wherever you can subscribe. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your family to listen. and also rate and review us and buy all his books. All the 3 books are still available through Open Letter's website, openletterbooks.org, for $40 for all 3 books in the trilogy. So get them now while the going's good and the TMRs are flowing.